In the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean lies a speck of land barely visible on the world map. Today, it's known as Tromelin Island. For a long time, it was simply called Sand Island. This tiny, flat islet, surrounded by coral reefs and battered by relentless ocean waves, seems unremarkable, a place any savvy sailor would sail past without a second thought. But Tromelin Island is home to one of the most remarkable tales in human history. In the 18th century, the Indian Ocean was a bustling hub of naval routes, colonial ambitions, and the dark trade in human lives. Amidst this global scramble, the island of Mauritius, then known as Isle de France, emerged as a pivotal outpost for the French in their Indian Ocean interests. Against this backdrop, in 1761, a ship belonging to the French East India Company embarked on a secretive and unlawful mission. It set sail from Madagascar under the cover of night, laden with a valuable cargo, not spices, textiles, or gold, but human lives. Malagasy slaves, natives of Madagascar, approximately 160 men, women, and children were on board, bound for the slave market of Mauritius. The trade in enslaved people was lucrative, despite growing ethical and legal constraints against it. Jean Lafargue, the captain of the ship, was driven by profit, ignoring colonial authorities' prohibition against the trade. As the ship navigated the treacherous waters of the Indian Ocean, it approached the small, uninhabited sand island. Despite its tiny size, only 1 mile long by half a mile wide, it caused chaos as it appeared on the horizon. The captain had 2 navigational charts of the area, but they both contradicted each other and were completely wrong. Combined with bad weather, this caused the ship to steer off course. On the night of July 31st, 1761, the ship struck the coral reefs surrounding Tromelin Island. The hull shattered, and within minutes, the sea claimed many lives, mostly those of the slaves trapped in the cargo hold. The dawn following the shipwreck revealed a desolate scene. The survivors, a mix of French crew members and Malagasy slaves, stood amidst the wreckage on a sliver of land in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Their fate was as uncertain as the horizon that stretched endlessly around them. Leadership fell to the ship's first officer, Barthélemy Castellan du Vernet, as Captain Lafargue had succumbed to a mental breakdown. Castellan rallied the survivors to salvage what they could from the wreckage, creating a stockpile of materials that would prove vital in the coming months. Among the debris, they found barrels of food, tools, and pieces of timber, which they used to construct rough shelters. The island offered no natural protection against the elements, a flat, barren landscape scorched by the relentless sun by day and chilled by winds at night. 2 camps were established, one for the slaves and another for the crew on the opposite side of the island. Castellan also built a forge and an oven with materials recovered from the wreck. The island offered no fresh water, but the castaways dug an impressive 5-meter deep well through a Herculean group effort over the next 3 days. However, hunger soon set in. The initial rations salvaged from the ship were consumed within a few days, and the island's barren landscape offered little sustenance. The castaways turned to the sea for fish and turtles, and to the sky for birds. These efforts were challenging. Fishing required skill and patience, and catching birds was no easy task on an island with little cover. Yet necessity drove innovation, and the survivors adapted, crafting makeshift fishing gear from the wreckage and devising traps to catch birds. Before long, Castellan and other crew members began constructing a boat using timber from the wreck. In a little over a month, they completed it and named her Providence. On September 27, 1761, 2 months after arriving on the island, the jerry-rigged Providence set sail. On board were 122 men, all French crew members and officers. Not a single slave was permitted on board. The Providence party left, promising to return to rescue the slaves. But as their captors disappeared over the horizon, the Malagasy must have felt as worthless as it is possible to feel. After 4 days at sea, the crew aboard Providence reached Madagascar and continued to Isle de France, where an unknown number of them died from tropical diseases. Eventually, the remaining crew reached Mauritius, returning to civilization. They did ask the port authorities to send a vessel to rescue the slaves left behind, but their request was was denied. Over the following years, members of the rescue party repeatedly asked for salvation for the slaves, but those in power refused to lift a finger. For 15 years, the plight of the Tromelin Island castaways remained a distant echo in the corridors of power in the French colony of Mauritius and back in France. The rescue of a few lost slaves was at the bottom of the to-do list. It's not like nobody knew they were there. Their abandonment was occasionally talked about in French newspapers. It's just that people didn't care enough. This was a time when society was brutally divided into classes, and to most people, a bunch of lost Malagasy slaves were about as lowly as they came. There were actually 2 rescue missions in 1773, but both were small in scale and failed miserably. The second attempt failed so spectacularly that one of the crew ended up getting marooned with the slaves on the island. Once on the island, he built a raft and loaded it with 3 Malagasy men and 3 women, but they all ended up getting lost and probably died at sea. Back in France, the relentless advocacy of Barthélemy Castellan du Vernet gradually began to pierce the veil of neglect. Haunted by the memories of those he left behind and bound by a promise of return, Castellan embarked on a tireless campaign to orchestrate a rescue mission. For years, his efforts were met with indifference. The logistical challenges of mounting a rescue operation to such a remote and perilous location were too great. However, Castellan's persistent lobbying, supported by a few sympathetic ears within the naval and colonial administration, slowly began to yield results. Attitudes towards slavery were also starting to shift, with public pressure mounting. The tale of survival on Tromelin Island lingered like a ghost story, largely untold and relegated to the footnotes of history until renewed interest emerged in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Archaeologists and historians, driven by a desire to uncover what really happened during those 15 years, set off on expeditions. Max Garout, a former French naval officer turned archaeologist, and Thomas Roman, a fellow archaeologist, embarked on what they named Expedition Forgotten Slaves. Over several years, they meticulously excavated the site, uncovering incredible artifacts that told a story of survival against all odds. Thanks for watching.